So I think that one thing that is really misunderstood in this manifesting law of attraction, law of assumption space, whatever you want to call it, is this idea, as we often talk about, that you are going to manifest your big desires quickly, that you are going to get your romantic partner within 3 days or 3 weeks or 3 months, that you're going to get that perfect job or that big sack of money, in a very short period of time, that you are going to regain your health if you're in poor health really quickly. And chances are that's not going to be the case for the vast majority of people. Sometimes, there are ways to quickly attain something in all those, aspects of life, health, relationships, finances. There are ways, right? But quite often, when we're trying to manifest what we really want, or, quote unquote, big things in our life, big external things, big external goals in our 3D life, it takes time. This is what you always hear Marvin and I talk about in terms of relationships. People think they're just going to get their perfect person back, or manifest a new relationship within a ridiculously short period of time, and it's often not like that. And what most people in this community, if you want to use that term, don't understand is this is a good thing. It's natural for things not to just come to us quickly when they're important. There's far too much resistance that most of us have. Far too much resistance to just make something magically appear over and over again quickly. Life, generally speaking, does not work like that. But if you watched a sensationalistic videos about manifesting things externally on YouTube, you might think that life is supposed to work like that. And you feel guilty, or you feel ashamed, or you feel embarrassed, or you just feel inadequate for not being able to manifest your partner back quickly, or manifest that dream job quickly, or manifest that perfect health quickly, or whatever it may be. And so much spiritual language is thrown around in regards to doing this, that it confuses us. In my opinion, if we're going to get more real about it from, like, you could say, a spiritual angle, and by that I just mean looking at it in the sense of, like, the universe or God is the creator, right? The source. If we look at it from that perspective, in a more mature, holistic way, where we're not trying to rush things and rush all these manifestations into demonstrations incredibly quickly. If we look at that in a more mature way, we become grounded in these principles, these ideas. And we actually begin to understand them and not feel frantic and overwhelmed with them working or not working. It's just a terrible way to go about this stuff, I think, if you're trying to rush yourself into manifesting something externally. Most of the time. It's just going to cause an incredible amount of stress and resistance usually. I'm not saying that doesn't have its place on occasion. And I'm not saying it won't work for some of you some of the time. Some of the time. But in my opinion, generally speaking, it's not a mature approach to these ideas. Failure, quote unquote, failure is a precursor to success. And spiritually, if you are a follower or a believer in a lot of these new thought type of ideas. When we get down to it, the golden key, as Emmett Fox said, stop thinking about your problems and think about God instead. God is too pure to behold iniquity. Neville always liked to quote that. When we look at it from that perspective, we realize that trying to, selfishly get something quickly is just that. It's very self-oriented, very, I guess you could say, ego or me-oriented. And it's not really taking a more spiritual, holistic, God is perfect, everything is unfolding perfectly all the time perspective into our lives. It's not integrating that latter perspective, that more quote-unquote spiritual perspective into our lives. So I wanted to read from The Art of Meditation by Joel Goldsmith, which we've read from several times recently, to put this in context. And again, this is for people who try to look at these things or want to look at these things from a spiritual perspective. Because again, we hear all this spiritual language about I am and, the perfection of God. But in my opinion, on YouTube, people are often paying lip service to that and not really considering or meditating upon what that means. I think the excerpt I'm going to read from Goldsmith is a little bit different because he's not just paying lip service to it. I think he does a really good job in this excerpt explaining what it actually means that God is perfect and we can rely on God, and that our failures are not really failures. So he writes here, the circumstances confronting you may appear terrifying and disaster imminent, but the Christ says, it is I, be not afraid. God has strange ways of bringing you to himself. Sometimes that which appears as disaster and the dissolution of that which you hold most precious is the very means of awakening you to the spiritual life. Never look upon temporary discord as failure, lack of demonstration, or the absence of spiritual vision and understanding. It was not lack of spiritual vision which drove Moses and the Hebrews into the desert experience. It was God leading them to a higher sense of good. It was not lack of understanding that sent Elijah into the wilderness to be so hungered that ravens had to bring him food. It was God proving to Elisha that there remained 7,000 who had not bowed their knees to Baal, and that even in the wilderness, there am I with thee, and able always to set a table before thee in the presence of thine enemies. It was not failure that took Jesus up into a high mountain, there to be tempted of the devil, or that brought him to the wilderness without food. It was God's way of revealing that he was not to seek demonstrations of things, that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. It was not failure that placed the Master on the cross, that incarcerated Peter and Silas in a prison cell, that fastened an asp on the hand of Paul. No, these were God's opportunities provided to prove the nothingness of that which the world called an evil power, even a deathly power. Never look upon the discords and inharmonies of your life as if they represented a lack of understanding or a lack of demonstration. Regard these unfortuitous circumstances as opportunities which will be dissolved when they no longer serve their purpose as spurs to your spiritual unfoldment. Have courage to look at every person and circumstance that you consider harmful or destructive. In the silence, face the situation fearlessly. Face the condition or the person, and you will discover that it or he is an image of your own thought, and therefore there is no cause, jurisdiction, or law to support it. Recognize God as the soul of every person and God as the activity in every situation. Fear not what mortal thought can think or do, since mortal thought is self-destructive. Fear not the thoughts or deeds of man whose breath is in his nostrils. You are the temple of God, and God is in his holy temple now. You are the temple of the living God. Your body is the temple of the living God. Your life, your soul, your mind is the abiding place of truth. And if you abide in this truth, and let this truth abide in you, no evil will come nigh your dwelling place. Fear not, rest in faith and confidence in the kingdom of God. That excerpt is not paying lip service to these ideas. God does not fail. As soon as we recognize that, we realize we are not a failure.